guys, what is up? It's Christine back at you with another video. We're doing another special this week, yes. So as we all know, I'm Filipino and I celebrate Philippine Independence Day. So this video is coming out on June 12, which is Philippine Independence Day. And I wanted to take this event to analyze and celebrate a dish that has been so controversial in history, but is something that is being brought back nowadays. So it is the Nutribun. So this Nutribun is something I made myself. I'm sharing my recipe for recreating the original Nutribun later. For y'all that aren't familiar, what is the Nutribun? The Nutribun, also known as the Nutriban, and my dad called it Nutribond. It is a bread that was used in feeding programs in the Philippines to combat the malnutrition that was happening in elementary schools. It was initially part of the USAID's program to help feed nations that weren't capable enough to feed themselves at that period. So for this original bread recipe, it was not developed here in the Philippines. As we said, it's part of the USAID program. It was developed in US in the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. This was developed between 1968 and 1970, so a few years before the program actually started here in the Philippines. And the original one was made with wheat flour and the non-fat dried milk, so powdered milk, donated by the US under the food aid. The recipe that we did implement here in the Philippines was made with the wheat flour they gave us, the milk powder they gave us, iodized salt, which we all put in breads as Filipinos, salt, and then we also integrated regional products like regional flours. So some regions had soy flour, some regions had rice flour. We did not just use wheat flour because as a country here in the Philippines, we do not grow wheat. We import our wheat. We get most of our wheat from abroad. We had to add to that to make sure that we can bulk it up. It also bulked up the nutritional value of it because these other flours that we were adding were helping to increase the nutritional value. What makes the Nutribun so special? It's actually a bread really similar to what we know as pandesal. However, the reason why this was chosen was because pandesals have a very long resting period. It's like an hour and then 2 hours, like 3 hours just for the pandesal. That's why bakers have to wake up super early just to get pandesals out by 6 a.m. So how the Nutribun worked was that it was local bakeries, so the local commercial bakeries that we would buy breads from, they would make their own formulation and they would blend local ingredients and the donated ingredients. They would bake it and then they would deliver the made Nutribun to the local schools. How this was paid was the school would reimburse the bakeries for the cost of local ingredients and their services. So it's legit just walang patong, which is why for a lot of students, it was given free, especially for the malnourished. But the problem was, this wasn't always the case. And we'll go into depth with this topic a little bit later. I just want to make this clear. A series of over 40 recipes has been developed for the Nutribun. So the Nutribun that I got wind of, the one that I have information on, may not be the Nutribun that you grew up with, but it's the one that I have information on and it's the one that I was given stories about. So this is the Nutribun that was from my parents' time, from my friends' relatives. We all came together to just brainstorm this recipe. Shout out to y'all. I know some of y'all who are watching helped me on this really ambitious video, so thank y'all. That being said, this is my interpretation of the Nutribun. It's based on the percentages of the Esquire article. It's gonna be linked below. But I did have to adjust based on my experience as a baker. I've been baking for 2 years. I love doing it, so maybe comment down below, give the video a like if you want to see more of my cooking creations. It's gonna be definitely fun to record. So for this recipe, I used 600 grams of bread flour, 360 grams of blood temperature water, 84 grams of powdered milk, 72 grams of sugar, 30 milliliters of vegetable oil, 9 grams of salt, 6 grams of yeast, which I divided into 150 grams per bun. I know the original Nutribun was like 160 to 170 grams per bun, but that didn't fit in the pan that I had. 160 and 170 made very, very big boys. This is already a pretty big and hefty boy. And this is just 150. Imagine adding extra 20 grams to this.
Nope.
Big. Very, very big. Here's a very interesting thing that came out when I asked my relatives and my parents about the Nutribun. The Nutribun apparently wasn't free. Not for everyone, at least. The Nutribun back in 1975, some places had it free, but some places didn't. So why was that the case? Here's a quote from a paper that I found on the Nutribun. The pupils were asked to share these costs, but not forced as a condition of participation. The pupils were asked to pay, especially those that weren't malnourished but was still provided with the Nutribun. They were asked to pay. This is the reason why people have conflicting reports on whether the Nutribun was paid or not. Some schools did not have the funding to pay the local bakeries and asked some of the kids to pitch in to paying them. Of course, that isn't to forget that there were actually suspicious occurrences that were happening at the time of corruption at a small scale where, for example, in my mom's school, her siblings in other grade levels did not have to pay for the Nutribuns, but my mom had to pay. It was 10 cents for the Nutribun on its own and 15 cents with the one with Klim, so that's the one with the milk. So for my dad, in their province, he had to pay 10 centavos for both the milk and the buns. It's just a little interesting if you look at it. So let's look at some reviews from the titas of Manila. I have 6 anecdotes from 6 titas of Manila plus a bonus one from my mom. So, 1, we have Tita 1. Tita 1 says na Nutribun daw ay lasang harina na may milk. Very interesting because, I mean, milky bread, it has really been a thing, but that is actually something that corroborates with another story later. So for number 2, Tito says that bread na slightly milky na very dense na may weird tapos nutrients. Very interesting and very vague. This one is from ang anak ni Tita 3. Naabutan ni Mama, may bukbok sa laman at luma yung flour. Naku! Yung naabutang Nutribun ni Tita ay galing sa lumang flour. So, dun sa lumang flour, maraming bukbok. Normal lang po yun. Pag luma na yung flour or quote-unquote expired na yung flour, magkakabukbok. So, for Tita 4, it says that in 1975, it was free for her kasi malnourished siya nung time na yun. Tita 5 said in 1974 to 1976, it was free for them. It had milk served with them. Okay, so it was within the span of the program with free milk. People aren't always that lucky, pero good for her. Tita 6, another one that's from 1976, but she has a different anecdote. She was 1976, but she didn't get to taste it. Just kind of weird because Tita 5 said that she had it from 1974 to 1976. The tita from 1976 said she didn't have it. So what happened in 1976? We actually don't exactly know what happened. It's possible in some bakeries they didn't continue making it as the time period went on because it wasn't profitable. We don't know, but it is unfortunate that some people during the period that the program was active was unable to get it. So this one, the last one, is from Tito, my dad. So he said na 10 or 15 cents yung Nutribun, anak. Anak, masarap at malaki at kasamang powdered milk. Yung kasamang powdered milk, that's Klim. Mom and Dad said it's good, so I believe them. Okay, so for this last anecdote, it's my mom's. So, ang sabi niya, grade 1 ako, yung teacher ko, binibenta yung Nutribun. 10 cents yun. Hindi siya shiny, para siyang putok pero walang sugar sa ibabaw. So that was one of the things that I had to take into consideration in making my Nutribun recipe because there was no hydration percentage mentioned in the thing that I looked at. I ended up not fully following that. What my mom said is para siyang putok na walang sugar sa ibabaw, parang bun na putok. Mabigat, milky, at half lang nabubusog na siya. Which I think is quite nice. Kaso nga lang, here's something that happened. So, a friend of mine sent me a bread, to which her relative said it's really close to the Nutribun. So she sent it to me, and I thought that maybe I could use this as a base. So that's the reason why my Nutribun looks like this. If I were to follow my original recipe, which had a lower hydration, this Nutribun would be very dense. Like, sa sobrang dense niya, pag binato ko sa'yo to, magkakabukol ka. This one is a lot softer, a lot more spongier, see, as you say. Look at that. Spongy. It bounces back. It's good. It's fluffy bread. So I ended up making my current recipe fluffy, but I still followed the same ingredients that were given. Unlike other Nutribun recipes that I saw online, my egg, my sour cream, my yogurt. Sis! Pang-combat ngas ng malnutrition sa poor areas, lalagyan mo ng yogurt, sour cream and yogurt, o kaya cream in general, just ka. Pero anyways, I digress. Recipe nila yon, and that's up to them. So here we are at the part. I'm gonna be reviewing this Nutribun that's been sitting beside me. I baked this earlier today, so malamig na siya. Big. It's kind of heavy. And then, see the break.
Oh, yes.
So it has a nice crumb structure. It's pretty soft and squishy and fluffy. I know I shouldn't play with my food, but I do want to show you how fluffy it is. It's a good piece of bread, so I'm just gonna take some. I'm gonna review it. The bread is good. There's something about it that's kind of weird. It does have the makings of a pandesal, but something about it's a bit off for me. It tastes like a combination of pandesal, putok, and yung tinapay ng siopaw. Like, it's not as dry as a putok. It has the taste and texture of a pandesal, but it has the mouthfeel of the tinapay ng siopaw. It somehow smells like a putok. A real confusing bread. I do think that this is closer to more modern bread, pero I don't think that this is that far off. So this is a start. If y'all want me to make a part 2 where I just test out Nutribun recipes, comment down below. I'm all for it. That would be very fun. But for now, we're stuck with this boil. So what's the future of this once controversial piece of bread? So this piece of bread was given out in the Marcos regime. It was given out in a time where people were very poor, very malnourished, and people got sometimes the wrong idea that this was a Marcos program, where in fact it was a USAID program. That's something that we do have to acknowledge because it is a part of history. There were claims that bags with the First Lady's name on it were the ones being used to pack it. However, the bread itself was being packed by wives of American soldiers or American people who were staying here in the Philippines. We have cases, anecdotes, we have proof that they happened, so we just have to acknowledge that. But the future of the Nutribun does seem bright. Nutribun was actually revived this 2020. I didn't make the revised Nutribun recipe because I do want to dedicate a full video for that, testing out the DOST's recipe, because I think it's really fun. So the Nutribun was revived in 2020 by the DOST FNRI. It was stated by the specialist who remade it, engineer Rosemary Garcia. She said that unlike the Nutribun in the 70s and the 80s, it was big, heavy, and hard. The e-Nutribun, the current Nutribun, is softer, easy to hold, bite, and was formulated to address the daily micronutrients of the Filipino children. Each serving of the e-Nutribun, weighing 160 to 165 grams per piece, has 500 calories, 17 grams of protein, 6 milligrams of iron, and 244 micrograms of vitamin A. It's really, really good. It's very jam-packed. We're able to do these things now because of science, and we're able to revamp such a product that was shrouded in such bad rep. It had a bad rep, okay? I was gonna say, Nutribun had a bad rep. Like, even when I talk to my relatives now, they don't look back at Nutribun fondly. A lot of them look back at Nutribun as something that they ate in a time of pain. It wasn't something that was a celebration. It was a necessity. It was something they had to eat to survive. Except for some people that did look back at it fondly, like my father. He grew up in poverty, so each meal like this was such a blessing for them that they saw it as something celebratory because they were able to eat something that wasn't rice and salt or rice and soy sauce. This new Nutribun that's being spearheaded by the FNRI is just a way to revamp this old bread in a time of need. The reason why the Nutribun was revamped in 2020 was because of what other thing happened in 2020? COVID. They had to revive it as a supplementary feeding program during the community quarantine or in other emergencies that did happen within the communities. This was used as a way to feed people like it used to feed people back then. Although before it was primarily just children who were malnourished, now it's a lot of people who just need something to eat. The recipe was distributed to local bakeries, so I do have a copy of some of those recipes. So let me know if you want to see this new futuristic Nutribun in a future video. I think it's really cool. I think what the DOST FNRI is doing now is really great. They're trying to take a product and better it and create a new and better version of it. And I think that looking back at the past with this piece of bread, I don't think it was that bad. I don't think it's bad to look at the past fondly because it is something that was given at the time to make life better. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that this Nutribun was up in a part of history that was controversial and it was used to save people at the time. It wasn't a project of the Philippine government. It is a product of foreign aid and, most importantly, the bayanihan that happened within the people. It wasn't the government. It was the people who came together, utilized this recipe, adapted these recipes, and were able to make these pieces of bread to give out to each other. Because these communities were relatively poor, and these people who made them were still also relatively poor. They were people who would wake up and work hard, yung mga manggagawa that had to work up and save up money. They also had to sacrifice that. These bakers and people who made these were just people trying to make ends meet as well. But instead, they used their time and effort, not asking for additional payment, but only asking for the cost of the ingredients themselves and the cost of their labor. Only that. That's the only thing that they ask to be reimbursed to them. And I think that's really something cool. And that's really something that we have to acknowledge, that it wasn't necessarily the big guys. It was all the little people coming together. And with that being said, thanks for watching this week's video. It was really fun filming this one, albeit stressful because it's kind of hard to film baking in a small space. But I did enjoy it. I hope you guys did too. And with that, guys, see you next week. Bye!